Hi guys, great to be here with you today. As we continue looking at heroes of faith, we move on to Abraham. And remembering what faith is from Hebrews 11 verse 1, it says that faith is having confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And if you want to read more about Abraham, then you'll find his story from Genesis 12 to 25. A bit of background to Abraham. One thing that is important to know is that he did not have any children, and it was a long time until he did. I know, that was a little bit of a spoiler. And at the start, he was called Abram, but God changed his name to Abraham, which means father of many, while Abraham had no children. But was this like a cruel mockery over Abraham, or did God have a plan in place? No prizes for guessing which one. God sees what is coming up next. God knows the future. To Abraham, could sounded ridiculous to be called that, especially when Abraham reached 99 years old. But God is not limited by what we think is possible. In Genesis 12, we start reading about Abraham, and the first thing that happens with Abraham is that God says, "Go from your country, your people, or your father's household to the land I will show you." God is telling Abraham to leave everything, leave his family, his friends, leave everything that he can't carry with him, leave the area he knows so well, and just go. And just keep going until God says so. Abraham didn't know when God would say stop. One of the things that I find hard to do for God is change. Often we don't like to do anything that means a lot of change, as change can be scary, it can be unknown, and can be full of anxiety and fear. But Abraham knows that God knows best, and if God says that actually, if you just stay here where you are, then you might be okay, you might have an okay life, but if you go where I want you to go, then an amazing life awaits for you. It is worth going every time. An amazing life, an exciting life with God, where you see God do incredible things, and you'll be part of that. That takes boldness, bravery, and above all, faith. It takes faith to change that much. And that is the kind of faith Abraham had. Abraham gets two separate mentions in Hebrews 11, and if you thought the first was difficult to do, then you should see what happens next. Giving God the thing you love most. We can say that God is our number one, but it's not until that choice actually comes up that we really know. Abraham loved his wife and they weren't able to have children together, but God gave him the gift of having a baby and they called him Isaac. Reading through the story and through the life of Abraham, it becomes quite clear how much both of them, particularly Sarah, loved Isaac, and they wanted the most for their child. God gives Abraham a test. Abraham says that God is the most important in his life, and when God says he wants him to sacrifice his son, to sacrifice Isaac, that's what you call crunch time. Will Abraham say no, saying that no, my son is more important to me and I can't lose him? Or will Abraham say yes, put his money where his mouth is, and do what God wants him to do? God had already told Abraham in Genesis 14, 4 to 5, that he would have a child with Sarah, and that if he could count the stars in the sky, then he'd be able to count his offspring as well. Which doesn't really make sense why God would ask him to sacrifice him. But with all that going through Abraham's mind, it says in Genesis 22:3 that Abraham doesn't seem to respond to God. He just gets up early the next morning and off they go to do what God asked him to do, showing why he is a hero of faith. So Abraham gets prepared, and just before he goes through with it, God comes out of nowhere and stops that from happening and provides a ram instead. At such an important time in Abraham's life, he could be thinking that there's no way out. He could be thinking that all hope would be lost. But then God shows up. That can often happen, really. And at times when we feel there is no way out, that there is no hope left, God shows up. Abraham showed us that he had God as number one in his life. And at no point did God disappoint him. Let's try and show the faith that Abraham did.